Alright, I'm told that I'm live, and we had a donation incentive for the voice language for this game, and it looks like Japanese won. So we're going to be hearing all the audio in Japanese. The text will still be in English, but all the character dialogue will be in Japanese. This game is Neptunia reVerse. It is Neptunia's big 10th anniversary game. And we'll get into that here in a minute. We're going to go ahead and get started. To start out, the most difficult menu in the entire game is going to be right at the very beginning. So I'm going to focus on that, and when we're done with that, I will start explaining things. So we're going to new game, and we're going to be doing this on arranged mode. The big difference with arranged mode is we're going to start the game with every character in the game. And for no story reasons are any characters going to leave our party. So we're going to have about 28 characters available to us for the entire game, but we're only going to be using 4 of them really. So let's go ahead and get started. In 3, 2, 1, go. So we're going to start out right at the very beginning. We have a forced loss. And we didn't die immediately, which is weird. That hardly ever happens. This game has very fast cutscene skips. So it's going to be all action for the most part. And I hit the wrong button to pause. Alright. This menu is very big and confusing, and it is 3 in the morning, so I am tired. So I'm not going to do it very quickly. And need one more. You. And that's the wrong one. Again. Very tired. Doing the wrong thing. Dang it. And equipment, and you get that. Yep. Okay, so that is the big difficult menu. All the other menus in the game are going to be way easier than that one. You just have to set everything up for the entire run, all at once at the very beginning. So, like I said at the beginning, there are like 28 characters available to us, but we're going to be using these 4 for the entire game. We're going to be swapping around some of the characters in the backline a little bit, because different characters have different abilities. And we want some of the other characters' passive abilities as we go through the game. But as far as combat, these are the only 4 we're going to use. If you're not at all familiar with these games, this is Hyperdimension Neptunia. This is their big 10th anniversary game, which is, at the time, it's only a PS5 exclusive. It may or may not come to other platforms. Who really knows with these people? They kind of just throw things out there willy-nilly. This is kind of a complicated game as far as like what this game is for the franchise. So this game is a port of a remake. So this is basically just the first game, but also it's kind of not. But we're not really going to get too into that because that's kind of a mess. So this is our first like tutorial boss, but since we have all these other characters that you don't normally have in like the regular game, we can just 2-shot it. Need to go to the guild, need to accept this quest, but we will never actually do it. Well, game took a second to load there. We need to go and we need to shop, and we need to sell. So in arrange mode, you start with one of every cosmetic item available in the game, and you just get a new one every time you new game. So if you keep new game plusing, you'll just keep getting these cosmetics. And they sell for really cheap, but there's a lot of them. So we're going to get all of our money for the entire run right at the very beginning. We're going to sell a bunch of these until we get to around 60k. And then we're going to buy a weapon for one of our characters, and we're going to buy 3 accessories. Alright, that's good enough. We're going to buy a weapon for you, and we're going to buy 3 of these life rings if I hit the right button. We're going to throw those on immediately. So right at the very beginning of this dungeon, we're going to have a rematch with a tutorial boss, but the exact same thing as last time is going to happen. We're going to 2-shot him. Or we can 1-shot him. I haven't seen that before, so that must be like a very rare damage range. So, who are these characters and why are we using them as opposed to any of the other 28 characters? The leader of the party, the one we have in front, the one we're actually controlling, she is the most defensively tanky character in the game, so she's going to be taking all the hits for us. We have her set as leader because most of the time enemies prefer to target the leader of the party. We're also going to save here because this first fight is kind of scary. As far as the other 3 characters, they are very good at dishing out damage in different ways. So this red girl, her name is Uzume. She is very good at building up the EXE gauge that's on the right side of the screen. That won't come into play until later, but that is her main role. And she does damage very well to things that resist physical damage. The other 2, who are Tekken and Pishi, are very good at dealing physical damage, but in different ways. Tekken is overpowered at the very beginning of the game because she has access to a late game item right out of the gate. Because normally in the base game, she is unlocked at the very end. She's one of the last party members. Neptunia, the re-neppening. That is this game in a nutshell. Alright. Believe it or not, that's a forced loss. And we just get behind her and 2-shot her. So this game, and most of the games in the series, have a mechanic where if you get to the side or behind an enemy, you will deal additional damage and have additional accuracy. So a lot of the time, we're going to be trying to get behind things before we hit it. We need to shop, buy a paw glove, and 4 Yugi bracelets. Need to grab this item, and we'll use that in just a second. We have to go collect the items for it first. Before we enter the dungeon, we need to equip these. That was that was right. So we need to go back here, we need to fight 1 optional enemy, because we need the item it drops. So we need to kill these little PS4 looking guys. Kind of look like PlayStation cats. Is this live? This is live. This is happening right now in front of your very eyes. So now that we've gotten those items from those enemies, we need to do another menu. And this menu is a lot shorter and a lot easier. We're going to implement the item that we got before. It'll weaken every enemy in the game, and we'll also implement the revive items. We need to change partners. And we're good to go. If you're at all familiar with the original game... Oh, walked right past it. If you're at all familiar with the original game, or, I guess, Neptunia Rebirth 1, for the most part, there aren't very many changes. There are just a couple of small changes. For one, pretty much every attack in the game will deal knockback. That's to balance a couple of different things, like the additional party member. In the original game, you only have 3 party members, but in this game, you have 4. Another thing that's different is in some fights, they have these extra enemies that prevent you from using your special attacks. Any, like, magic attacks that use the blue meter at the bottom. In any fight where these guys pop up, we have to aim for them first so that we can use our abilities. And Ishii is very inaccurate. She misses most of her attacks. That is how they quote-unquote balanced her for being so strong. As soon as we enter this dungeon, we get thrown into another mob fight. We're just going to spam skills. Except for Tekken here. Tekken here, she does not get an attacking skill until we're about a third of the way through the game. As soon as we finish that, we're going to leave and then re-enter the dungeon to refill all of our health and magic. And a theme for this game, especially this version, is that we're going to rush to the bosses at the end of dungeons. We're not really going to go out of our way to grind. There's no grinding in this category. And we're not really going to fight anything else optional for the rest of the game. We have all the items we need already. Money isn't an issue, so we don't need for that. And while we're going to be under-leveled about halfway through the game, because we have this combination of characters, we're just going to tank most fights. We're going to transform with her. That is not a mechanic that we always have access to, but we do have access to it in this fight. We can't reach with her, and we can reach with her. We're going to get to the side and behind, and we're going to punch. At this point in the game, we're just spamming power attacks. You have 3 different types of moves. You have break attacks, power attacks, and rush attacks. We're just spamming power attacks because we just really want raw damage output at the moment. Now, I know these enemies look the same as the ones I was talking about earlier, but they're different. In typical JRPG fashion, we use the same enemies to be different enemies constantly. So we do have access to skills right now, but we don't want to use them. And that's because we have to do 2 fights in a row in this dungeon. And we'd much rather spam skills on the second one. Especially when Tekken can just walk up and do that. Oh, and if you ever notice that the HUD is like flickering on and off, that's because the same button that turns off the HUD is the same button that you use to skip cutscenes. So sometimes you just mash it too quickly. So none of these enemies can really hurt us that much, but they're all very tanky. Which is why we wanted to save our special attacks for this fight. Now here, we can just start spamming them. There is going to be a third fight when we leave the dungeon, but since we technically leave the dungeon before that fight starts, both of the meters are refilled. Whoops. And here is one of those little skill jamming pods that we do have to take care of. This is the first fight with the Gillasheen. It is a reoccurring boss. We'll see it a bunch, and it's not really noteworthy, like at all. If we were playing the original version of this game, this fight could be scary, but here it's just kind of slow. It pushes us back every other turn. We just have to keep walking back up to it to punch it. And at this point in the game, Tekken finally has an attacking skill, so we can start spamming those with her as well. Something that you may have noticed, one of the appeals of this series is that pretty much every playable character in this franchise is female. There's a single male playable character across like 15 games, and he is a joke character. We don't want to go back in there. We want to go over here. We need to shop, we need to buy the cat puppet and 4 Toki bracelets. Now we can buy some life fragments, which we implemented earlier. Yes. Skip some more cutscenes. Things move around in the menu a lot. So, you can't just do the same input every time. Don't know why. This is the only game in the series like that. If you ever notice me picking up things in the dungeon as I walk through them, just know that they're not needed. I'm just picking them up because they're there. Sometimes you just need something to do. Shocking, a Moe game series having all female characters. Yep. This series is mostly like lighthearted comedy and like just cutesy or fan servicey. Although underneath all of that, there is a very solid like JRPG series here. This game especially, since we skip every cutscene in the game, we're pretty much only going to see like gameplay, straight gameplay. Yes, the only male party member is... Also, I need to save... No, not here. I need to save in the next one. Yeah, the only male party member is in B2 and B2R. It's Umio, and he's a DLC character. You need to try to take out these angels first because they have heals. We're just going to focus them down one at a time with Blanc and Uzume. I don't know if I actually said Blanc's name earlier. Blanc is the big white girl with the blue hair right now. Most of the characters have transformations. 3 out of 4 of the characters we're using do. The only one who doesn't is Tekken. And she just died, but that's fine. Nope. Okay. This mob fight is the only thing that we're doing in the dungeon, so it doesn't really matter. Like, we can use all of our SP gauge here. Go all in on killing these guys. Even though Tekken was dead at the end of that fight, she still gets XP. Everyone always gets XP in this game. Idea Factory, Idea Factory and Compile Heart, who are the developers and publisher for this game, are known for making basically games on a budget. This is an RPG series on a budget. They reuse a lot of assets across their games. This entire franchise, the Neptunia franchise, was founded on an asset flip. The first game in the series is just straight up an asset flip. But even though a lot of the assets are reused, it doesn't take away from the actual RPG stuff going on. Ooh, she got pushed way back. That sucks. This whale can be scary, but we have so many revives and healing items that we don't really need to be too scared of it unless it decides to start nuking us right now. Nope. Fishing pond, we don't want to go into those. Those just take us to the fishing minigame, which, believe it or not, is not necessary. We don't have to go do that. And this is going to be the last dungeon for this section of the story. We're going to try very hard to avoid that horse bird, because it is way faster than us, and our only option would be to fight it, and that is slow and painful because it hits really hard. So at the end of this dungeon, we're going to have a series of 3 fights. We're going to have a fight we have to win, followed by a forced loss that we're going to win, followed by a third fight that is even harder than the forced loss that we're going to have to win. So this is the last, like, big, scary fight, at least for a while. So we're going to save here, just to be safe. So even though this is a fight where we start off transformed and we don't actually have to do it ourselves, we are very underleveled at this point in the game. And for the rest of the game, we're going to be very underleveled. Okay, we need to start spamming. Okay, she's very low on health. She dies, we just revive her, so it'll probably be okay. Yeah, that's probably okay. Nope, she's also out of SP. Probably should have noticed that. She's out of SP. This is like the last big reset point in this game. You may have noticed she's hitting a lot harder than everything else up to this point in the game. Yeah, we need to break her shield. We're gonna boost tech and strength. And Tekken said, "It's okay. Fight's over." So that fight was, we were supposed to win that one. This is the unwinnable fight that we're going to win. Although Tekken was dead at the end of the fight, so she didn't get her stats reset. At the beginning of fights where everyone is forced to transform, like this fight, if they're forced to transform, they automatically get all of their health and SP back. Unless they don't have a transformation, like Tekken. So she started with low health. Alright, so that was the forced loss that we won very quickly. And this is another fight that we have to win. But we're just going to do like most of our health in a single hit. The slower the first fight goes, the faster that one goes. Because we build up the EXE meter, which is a mechanic we're about to start abusing. It's almost time. But first, we need to buy a weapon for Uzume. We need to buy 4 Dark Star bracelets. And before we enter this dungeon, we need to equip all that. Again, things move around in the menu all the time. It's very hard to keep track of. Alright. So now we need to remove all the power attacks. We're done with that. We're going to start rushing things. Whoops. Just... Rapid rush. Rapid rush. We need to remove our combo finishers. Even though the combo finishers are extra damage, they deal knockback, and we don't want any more knockback than we already deal. For the most part, we want things to stay still. Every character in the game automatically deals knockback on the first hit of their combo, except for Uzume, who is the redhead girl we have with us. She's the only character who doesn't for some reason. Whether or not that was intentional or an oversight, who really knows? Whoops, I almost forgot to swap party members. I swear I'm good at this game. These two swap, and then you're out, and you're in. And that is the last time we'll move any party members around. And yeah, these games love throwing unwinnable fights at you. So we're going to start rushing enemies now, instead of doing power attacks. That fills up the EXE gauge on the right side, and that lets us use our big super moves. And those super moves are going to be our main form of damage from now on. Because since we're so underleveled, doing anything else is kind of just going to be a huge time sink. And this is another reason we have Tekken on the team. Tekken's EXE, which is the name of the big super move, is very, very good at single target. Her damage output is crazy high for like the entire game. Species is very high as well. It does drop off right at the very end, but by that point in the game, there's no point in changing it. For like the last 2 fights. Uzume is the best rusher in the game. She has the best rush attacks. The reason rush attacks are important is the EXE meter works on a point system. You basically need to get 200 points to fill up the little segments of it. And each segment lets you use one big super move. Rush attacks have a multiplier. They're the only type that have a multiplier. So like power and break attacks give you 1 point per hit. Rush attacks give you 5 per hit. And each one of Uzume's attacks does 8 hits. So Uzume alone can fill up nearly an entire bar. Especially if she hits multiple enemies. And that's just going to get better as we go through the game. If I can hit the middle one. There we go. Can't quite reach. A lot of fights where you just don't hit damage rolls just turn into waiting for the enemy. Because the bigger the attacks you do, the longer the wait is between turns. And since EXEs are very big, powerful attacks, they have very long wait times afterwards. Also, I hope you like the layout of this dungeon because we go through it 3 times. Not this dungeon specifically, just 3 separate dungeons that all look the exact same. But at least they have different songs. So, if you're playing this game casually, at this point, you're about halfway through the game. In a speed run, we are 2/3 of the way done. The last half of the game is way faster than the first half. And that's because now that we have EXEs, fights are going to go a lot faster. And also, in the next chapter, we're going to pick up another ability that we're going to implement that's going to make it so that EXEs build even faster. And then every fight's basically just going to be like rushing to fill the meter. Literally and figuratively. Just gonna hope that Blonde doesn't get paralyzed. Nope. Okay. Okay, she kind of left the group, so we have to take care of her separately. And now we're in the exact same dungeon again. But it's different. Or so the game tells me. Yeah, you would think that power or break would contribute much to the gauge, but no. If you want the fill to gauge at all, you need to use rush attacks. I guess we used power attacks earlier because those are just raw damage output. They're very good for just dealing damage. Breaks, Blonde was using breaks earlier. Breaks' only real purpose, they don't do good damage and they don't fill the meter. They just lower shields. And once shields are broken, you deal extra damage. But at this point in the game, we really don't care about shields. We just kind of want to walk up and nuke things. Whoops, wrong direction. Alright, and that was the end of Chapter 4. We have 4 chapters to go. That's not what I need to do. I need to pick this up. And then I need to shop. I need to buy another weapon for Pishi. Go over here, slap it on. I also need to actually implement the plan. I've forgotten to do that so many times. So now we gotta run through a cave, and we're just running through the cave to get to a mob fight at the end. We're going to, once we finish that mob fight, we're then going to go into another series of boss fights that have a winnable, unwinnable, winnable fight. We have 2 forced losses left in the game, and that's one of them. We're gonna hope this guy doesn't... Okay, he saw us, but he didn't catch us. We're going to try to fill up the meter as quick as possible. We're also gonna knock these guys together. And then Blonde's big move is an AoE, so we just nuke everything. Go back to the city, skip some cutscenes, and we're into those boss fights. Can't get around. In between fights, we're going to lose the EXE meter, so we're just going to use as much of it per fight as we can. And since this is a forced loss, we're just going to huddle up. Blonde is going to switch out because her defense is crazy high. Neptune will die a lot faster like that. Uzume, the squishiest party member, lived the longest somehow. Alright, now we're actually going to win this fight. At this point in the game, our strategy is kind of just devolved into filling the meter. In other games, or even other routes for this game, we don't rely on the EXE meter so heavily. This chapter is going to be very short and sweet. We're going to shop. We need to buy a weapon for Uzume. We need to buy a weapon for Tekken. It's somewhere here in the middle. There it is. Then we need to buy a weapon for Blonde, which is, yeah, this one. We're going to slap all of that on before we do anything else. Skip a bunch more cutscenes. Yeah, that's basically the strategy, is you press button to make bar go down. This category is very fast, at the sake of complexity. Yes, hitboxes are very janky. They don't really line up very well with the models. That's not really something they ever got good at in this franchise. Some games are better than others, but this game, it's very noticeable. There are enemies where their hitboxes are basically just like cylinders around them. They don't really line up at all. Alright, so this is the last forced loss for the entire run. But the EXE meter is going to carry over to the next fight, which we do have to win. So we are going to hit it a few times to try to get some meter. Gonna swap. Neptune will die way faster. Alright, we're just not gonna hit with Neptune. Alright, so no more forced losses. Need to boost Tekken. Tekken's gonna go to the side, EXE. So this boss is extremely tanky. And we're also like 20 levels under what we need to be. So this is gonna take a minute. This is also going to be us managing the meter, as well as every time you EXE, it affects the boss's turn. So we're going to be trying to give her as few turns as possible. Ooh, Ishi died. That's weird. A lot of the time, no one really dies in this fight. It's just very slow, but usually not deadly. That's the end of that chapter. We have 2 left. So if you ever played the original version of this game, this is Chapter 7, which is the chapter where you lose all of your party members and everyone splits up. And then you have a series of very difficult boss fights with very limited options. In this game, in this game mode, because the option to play the original game mode is still here. But in this game mode, since we have all the characters all the time, these fights aren't really that difficult. So in this dungeon we have 2 boss fights we have to do, so we're going to fill up the meter in this one so that we can carry that over to the second one. And then we just have to walk to the back of the dungeon. At this point in the game, if we touch any enemies, we're kind of dead. The enemies can also very easily kill us. We're going to make one last save. Well, not one last save. We'll probably save before the final boss. So, since we already have EXE filled up, we'll just walk behind her and use it. Oh yes, when I say original, I am talking about Rebirth 1, which is a remake of the original game. The original game is nothing like this. Again, this is a port of a remake. Very, very weird stuff. So the original game in the series is Hyperdimension Neptunia. A few years later, they remade it into Rebirth 1, which is a full-on remake. It's nothing like the original. You can even call it a reimagining. A few years after that, they ported the game into Rebirth Plus. And this is a port of that port called reVerse. All 4 of those are different games, I promise. They're all 4 very different. And not always necessarily for the better. Alright, very low rolls on the damage there. So the bosses we're fighting right now are basically copies of the 4 main characters. The 4 main goddess characters of the franchise. The first one was Purple Heart, which was a copy of the main character of the entire series, Neptune, who we've seen die a few times in some fights. The one we just fought was Blackheart, who was a copy of Noir, who we have not and will not see for the entire game. Same with this upcoming one. This is going to be Greenheart, who was Vert. And then the 4th one, who is going to be a copy of the main girl we've been playing as, her, Blonde, will be after this fight. If you don't know, these 4 characters are parodies of real-life video game consoles. Most of the goddesses in this game are actually parodies of actual video game consoles. These 4 specifically are meant to parody the 7th generation console war. That would be the Nintendo Wii, the PlayStation 3, and the Xbox 360. And Neptune is she's not a fictional console. She's just based off of a canceled Sega console that never left development. Another example is Uzume, the redhead girl in our party. She is based off of the Dreamcast. And Pishi is also based off of some obscure console that I've never actually seen or heard anyone talk about. She's not actually based off the PC, despite the fact her name kind of sounds like PC. She's based off of a console. Really bad damage rolls. Everyone who isn't a console is based off of a company. So, well, I was about to say Tekken, but Tekken is the only exception. Tekken is based off of the series Tekken. We just got a hammer for Blonde. We're going to slap that on immediately. For example, the main 2 companions that you start the game with are IF and Compa, who are the developers for this game, actually. Idea Factory and Compile Heart. So everyone in these games are either video game consoles or video game developers. Whoops, don't have enough for that. So we're about to have to do this fight twice in a row. It's going to be very similar both times. The main difference is the second fight is going to be a lot easier than this first fight. And it's the same deal as before. It's a lot of meter management. A hidden mechanic that the game never tells you about, but it is there, is damage multipliers based off of your combo. The higher your combo, the more damage attacks will do, actually. So if we can, we're going to try to get either Pishi's or Tekken's attacks at the end of long strings. This far into fight, it's very hard to manipulate turn orders, so we just kind of take what we're handed. Oh, Tekken's dead. That's fine. The fight is pretty much over. There we go. And yeah, every now and then, specific, like literally specific people, developers show up as like gags or jokes, or even attacks. That doesn't happen very often, and even if it did, we wouldn't see it because we skip all the animations. Because these attacks do have animations, but there's animation skip. Alright, and just like that, we're at the final dungeon. I have to actually watch some cutscenes first. We need to equip. You get the Sherasite, and you get the bookmark. Is there a character for the CDI? I don't believe so. And they're still making these games. They are still making new characters based off of consoles. A new entry in this series just came out about a week ago, and it introduced more characters based off of more consoles. They recently got around to talking about cell phones, which is fun. They had nothing to say about cell phones. This is a series that very much, it came out, it started in 2011, and it feels like it stayed in 2011. Alright, that's our last save, because we are approaching the final boss. So this final boss has two phases. The first is going to be the witch again, and then the second is going to be a big dragon. Time is going to be at the final hit of the big dragon. The final boss isn't free, though. We're still extremely underleveled. You see, we're only doing, like, double-digit damage. She has very heavy knockback and very high defense. The only way we're really going to be able to damage her is with the EXEs. And both her and the dragon phase have moves that can instantly delete our characters. We usually call those nukes. Because for some reason they thought it was a good idea to give bosses comeback mechanics. Alright, there's phase one. We got one more fight left. And this is our final boss, True R4. Now she hits a lot harder, so she's a lot scarier, but she has way, way lower defense. So we're about to just like chunk her down right now. And we're done. And that is Hyperdimension Neptunia reVerse. A nice, short, sweet, about 45, 50-minute run. Our final time was a 48:51, which is only about a minute and a half behind world record. So, pretty good. Geez, guys. Shoutouts to DeBombstew for doing all the actual routing for this game. 99% of what I've done here is from his routing. I changed very few things to make things faster. And shoutouts to the rest of the Neptunia speedrunning community. That's really all I have for you guys today. Next up, I believe, is Barney's Hide and Seek, if I remember right. It's got quite the lineup coming up, guys.